Hey gang, it's Kenny, your pool school guy, and it is just over a week past Labor Day in Arizona, and it is still forecasted for about 106 degrees. So that means kids are still swimming, you're still having to do your chemistry and all that, and so really stay on top of that. And again, just a mild warning, please remember to watch your kids around water, make sure somebody is designated to do so. Anyway, I've gotten a lot of questions recently about priming a pump. And so this lesson is going to be on priming a pump and why you shouldn't have to do it. So let's dive right in. Okay, so really quick review about your pool, all right? Pools work on what we call a closed system. What that means is that there is no air getting into the system, or there should not be any air getting into the system, all right? So there are things that can cause that to happen, but the water acts as a barrier between the suction and the return of your pool and what happens in between. And again, you can refer back to my lesson on getting to know your pool. It's one of the, I think it's like the second lesson I posted. You want to refer to that so you can see how the systems work. But there shouldn't be any air getting in there. What should get in there is water. Water not only kind of goes through the system and gets filtered and cleaned out and everything, but it also acts as a coolant for your pump and motor and everything. So know that, because if your pool starts to suck air and the pump runs dry, it will generate so much heat. I have seen it literally create scalding water in the bottom of your pump basket basin, which literally can put severe burns on you. It will also get so hot that it will melt the basket inside your pump. So again, water acts as a coolant, not just being filtered through the system, but it also acts as a coolant to keep the system from overheating. But again, it's a closed system. That means, again, that there is no air getting into it, all right? So there are some reasons that air can get into it. I'll go into that later, but first I want to talk about the pump and how it primes. Okay, so I am at a pump. This is actually a Hayward Super 2, and it's an easy pump to kind of deal with. So this is a Hayward Super 2 pump, and I'm gonna open the lid really quick. I'm gonna use my handy dandy tool. This is a Caretaker Union wrench. That's kind of how it's listed. And I'm just going to use that to open the pump, and the lid comes off. All right, you notice there's some stuff in there. So a couple things in regarding this. Let me just empty this real quick. First of all, you see there's water in there. And you also notice that this basket has a particular shape to it. That's important. It's got a specific opening. All right, so first and foremost, when you clean your pump basket, I've done a video on this also. You want to make sure that that pump basket seats in the way it's supposed to. And you see that opening, you see it, that opening right there needs to line up with the opening of the pipe of the water coming from the pool into the pump, right? Make sure that settles down in there. The other thing is I want you to notice is this right here. This is a little O-ring. Okay, let's see if I can get it out. All right, this O-ring creates a seal. It's not going to come out now. It creates a seal for the, I can't get it out. Anyway, it creates a seal for the pump lid, right? Or the pump basket lid, and that seals air from getting in. Sometimes this O-ring can get cracked, in which case you need to replace it, or it can get a little dry, in which case you take this thing out, it comes right off, it seats in a little grid. Let me see if I can get it. I really do think I need to. There you go. Okay, so that's it. It's a little dirty, but it's okay. Part of that is because I have lubricant on it. But sometimes all you need to do is take some lubricant, and you can go to Pool Supply Store and get some. I use a product called Magic Lube. I use another one that I get locally that I don't think you can get, so I won't even mention it. But you lube this up really good, and then you can put that right back into the little groove that it fits into, right? And then your lid goes back on. And you should never have to crank the lid down. It should just be snug, all right? Now, here's the thing. Most pumps are self-priming, meaning as long as the system is sealed, when you fire up the unit, it should prime itself because it's creating suction because of the closed system. So you can hear it right now, and if you listen carefully, when it starts to prime, hear it change sounds? That's showing me that it's priming, and see the water running in there? Eventually that water and all that bubble in there will just clear up, okay? So that's pretty much how a self-priming pump works. Most pumps today are self-priming. Unless you have seriously an ancient relic, that's the way it works. And so you don't really have to worry about priming your pump. So, what happens if you need to prime your pump? Well, before we get there, let's talk about what can cause air to get into your system. First and foremost, one way air can get into your system is if your pool water level is too low. And remember, I told you that you always want to check your pool water level, and it should be about halfway up the tile line, or if you look at the opening of your skimmer, you want it to be halfway up covering that opening. If it gets below that skimmer line, or it gets below the level of your skimmer, then that means that water, instead of water being sucked in there, it's going to be air, and that's going to create air into your system again, which can lead to all kinds of trouble. So always, first and foremost, keep your water levels where they're supposed to be, all right? So the second thing that can cause it is some kind of break or crack or leak somewhere in the system between the suction from the pool and the return to the pool. So that could be a pipe, but you want to be careful, because if it's a pipe, you're going to probably have to have a certified, licensed, bonded repair guy come out and take care of that, because those can get really difficult, especially if the pipes are underground. But a quick thing to check for a troubleshooting is make sure that there's no leaks in your filter. Make sure that, I'm going to turn this around so you can see. Make sure that your pump lid is sealed correctly and the O-ring is lubed. So I always kind of, first and foremost, what I do when I troubleshoot is I'll open up the pump, I'll make sure again the system is off, and I will check the O-ring, making sure that it's seated in properly, making sure that it's lubed and it's not too dry, and obviously it's not cracked, in which case I'd either replace it or lubricate it. I also look at the lid and make sure there's no crack in the lid. A crack in the lid can cause air to be sucked in there as well. And you notice in this one, you see hardly any air in there now circulating. That means, again, the system is nice and tight, okay? So that's the first thing I check. You might also want to look at the pump basket and make sure that that basket is seated in correctly, okay? So all of those things. You should not have to crank the whole lid down. Should be just hand snug, maybe a little bit farther than that, and you should be good. The other thing I check is this pressure release valve on the top of my filter. If it was open right now, there'd be water coming out of here. But if it was open when the pump is shut off, of course, it's going to suck air down into the system. So you want to make sure that that's closed, and it should be fine. And then I just kind of look at the system. I look at the filter, and it doesn't look like there's any water leaking out around the belly band, and there's no water leaking around here. So everything's in good shape. So that means my system's in good shape. But that's usually the reasons that you have to prime a pump, is that somewhere there's air getting in your system, okay? Now, there's one other way that air can get in your system, and that is if you shut your, let's say you've shut your pump off, and you open it up, and you leave that open for an extended period of time. Well, it's a good chance that that could create enough air in there that it can't get that suction to start pulling water out of the pool. It does most of the time, but if you run into that situation, then I'm going to talk you through what you need to do. First and foremost, make sure the system's not going to go on. You're going to open your pump lid. All right, I'm not going to do it on this one because it doesn't need to be primed. You see it's completely full. Open your pump lid, all right, or that skimmer, or that pump basket lid. Get a hose, and you're going to fill this container, right, that pump sump, you're going to fill it with water, all right? And then immediately put the lid back on, making sure that your O-ring is seated correctly, and then flip the switch and fire the system back up. And what that does, it creates kind of a siphon. It creates a little enough pull that it can pull the water from the pool and start the flow of water into the thing. One thing that helps, this valve right here, this valve on this pool controls the suction from the pool. There's two pipes going into it, you notice. One pipe, this one, because most of the suction is to it, is to the dedicated vacuum line. This pipe and I know that because of experience, and I know this pool, this pipe is from the skimmer. So it's usually easier to prime a pump if you need to by turning the suction mostly to the skimmer, providing you got enough water in your pool. So you can turn this valve to where all the water is being pulled from the skimmer as opposed to the vacuum, because the vacuum sits on the bottom of the pool, and so water would have to travel uphill and up through the hose. So by putting it to the skimmer to start the priming process, it helps it prime quicker, and it doesn't have to pull as hard on the water because it's usually closer to level with the system. And then once it gets going, I'll move that valve back so that the vacuum has enough suction to work. Oh, another note, in addition to all my other notes. Think about this. Water flows downhill, right? So if your pool equipment sits much higher than your pool itself, because I know some pools that are built on hills and the equipment's above the pool, or quite high above the pool, then that water has to flow uphill. So it might take a little longer for your pump to prime. And again, it becomes much more important that your system is very sealed and there are no leaks. Conversely, if your pool equipment sits below the level of your pool, then water's probably going to run out even when you open that pump cover. So make sure that if you do something like that, you're gonna have to shut the valves off, the suction valves off, so that the water doesn't flow out of the pool into that. It's a little bit trickier, but you can still do it. Anyway, just remember that if it sits higher, it's probably gonna take a little longer to prime. So there you have it, folks. That's basically how, if you need to, how you prime your pool pump. But remember, again, going back to it, the pool works on a vacuum system or a closed system, which means you should never have to prime your pump because there shouldn't be air getting into your system. There are various reasons why air can get in the system, but again, most pumps nowadays, unless they're back from the 70s or 80s, anything earlier than or sooner than that is probably going to prime itself. They're self-priming, all right, as I showed you in this video. But again, you can always troubleshoot. First and foremost, if you find that there is air getting in your system somehow, make sure you check your water level, make sure it's the proper height, all right, or the proper level. Remember, halfway up the tile line or halfway covering your skimmer opening in your pool, that's a good indicator of how high your water should be. And then again, check your pump, check the lid, make sure there's no crack in it, make sure it's snug, check the O-ring to make sure that it's not cracked or dry. If it is, you either replace it if it's cracked, or if it's dry, you can lubricate it, probably using a product like Magic Lube. And you want to just lube the whole thing up, probably want to wear like some latex gloves to protect your hands, because that stuff is really goopy and it's a pain. And I use these little nitrile gloves whenever I do something using the lubricant. And then make sure that O-ring is seated properly, and make sure that your pump basket is in correctly, right? Because again, some of them have a unique shape and they're made to put in there a certain way. So make sure that's in place. And then see if there's still air getting in the system once you fire it up and everything, then you might have to call a professional out to come and look to see if there's any leaks in your plumbing somewhere in your piping and everything, and that becomes a real pain. And again, you can also check the filter to make sure that the pressure release valve is closed and that there's no cracks in your filter. That's usually very rare. I honestly, in 19 years of doing this, I've never seen a filter get to that place where the air was coming in because of a crack in the filter. Right? So usually if there's a crack in the filter, water's spraying everywhere and you can see it and you get it fixed as soon as possible. Again, remember this, if you do need to prime your pump, again, because of water getting in there, or air getting in there somehow, or things like that, make sure that make sure the system's not going to come off. Open the lid, fill up the pump with water, close the lid immediately, making sure everything's seated in place, and then flip the switch and it'll start to fire. And if you want to help it pull easier, turn the suction to the skimmer only so that it gets an easier chance to prime. Once it primes, put your suction valves back where they need to go and you're good to go. Anyway, I hope that helps. Again, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comment section below, or you can email me directly, and again, it's probably going to show up right over here, kennypoolschool@gmail.com. Again, Kenny shoudn'tpoolschool@gmail.com. Also, may I encourage you to watch probably my second video that I released about knowing your pool or getting to know your pool. I think it was called Getting to Know Your Pool or About Your Pool. It's really good to know how the system works because when it comes to troubleshooting, it really helps. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Share this video and my channel with all your friends who have their own pool, and maybe it can save them a lot of money as well and help to empower them to take care of their own pool so that they're not having to shell out a lot of extra money, because that extra money goes a long way elsewhere. Thanks again for watching. Remember, have a great day. Have fun. Be safe, and always, always watch your kids around water. I'll see you next time.